Hi everybody. Sorry I'm not there this week, but I'll see you next Wednesday for chapter 6. But meanwhile, I've decided to record chapter 5, and it's called Diagon Alley. Harry woke up early the next morning. Although he could tell it was daylight, he kept his eyes shut tight. It was a dream, he told himself firmly. I dreamed a giant called Hagrid came to tell me that I'm going to a school for wizards, and when I open my eyes, I'll be home in my cupboard. There was suddenly a loud tapping noise, and there's Aunt Petunia knocking on the door, Harry thought, his heart sinking, but he still didn't open his eyes. It had been such a good dream. Tap, tap, tap. All right, Harry mumbled, I'm getting up. He sat up, and Hagrid's heavy coat fell off him. The hut was full of sunlight. The storm was over. Hagrid himself was asleep on the collapsed sofa, and there was an owl rapping its claw on the window, a newspaper held in its beak. Harry scrambled to his feet. So happy he felt as though a large balloon was swelling up inside him. He went straight to the window and jerked it open. The owl swooped in and dropped the newspaper on top of Hagrid, who didn't even wake up. The owl then fluttered onto the floor and began to attack Hagrid's coat. Don't do that! Harry tried to wave the owl out of the way, but it snapped its beak fiercely at him and carried on, savaging the coat. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, there's an owl. Pay him, Hagrid grunted on the sofa. What? He wants paying for delivering the paper. Look in the pockets. Hagrid's coat seemed to be made of nothing but pockets. Bunches of keys, slug pellets, balls of string, mint humbugs, tea bags. Finally, Harry pulled out a handful of strange-looking coins. Give him 5 nuts, said Hagrid sleepily. Nuts, the little bronze ones, said Hagrid. Harry counted out 5 bronze coins, and the owl held out its legs so it could put the money into a small leather pouch tied to it. Then it flew through the open window. Hagrid yawned loudly, sat up and stretched. Best be off, Harry. Lots to do today. Gotta get up to London and buy all your stuff for school. Harry was turning over the wizard coins and looking at them. He had just thought of something which made him feel as though the happy balloon inside him had got a puncture. Hagrid? Said Hagrid, pulling on his huge boots. I haven't got any money, and you heard Uncle Vernon last night. He won't pay for me to go and learn magic. Oh, don't you be worrying about that, said Hagrid, standing up and scratching his beard. Do you think your parents didn't leave you anything? But if their house was destroyed? They didn't keep all their gold in the house, boy. Nah, first stop for us is Gringotts Wizard Bank. Have a sausage. They're not bad cold, and I wouldn't say no to a bit of birthday cake neither. Wizards have banks? Just the one, Gringotts, run by goblins. Harry dropped the bit of sausage he was holding. Goblins? Yeah. So you'd be mad to try and rob it. I'll tell you that. Never mess with goblins, Harry. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want kept safe. Except maybe Hogwarts. As a matter of fact, I gotta visit Gringotts anyway for Dumbledore, Hogwarts business. Hagrid drew himself up proudly. He usually gets me to do the important stuff for him. Fetching you, getting things from Gringotts. He knows he can trust me, you see. Got everything? Come on then. Harry followed Hagrid on out onto the rock. The sky was quite clear now, and the sea glimmered in the sunlight. The boat Uncle Vernon had hired was still there, with a lot of water in the bottom after the storm. How did you get here? Said Harry, looking around for another boat. Flew, said Hagrid. Flew? Yeah, but I'll have to go back in this. Not supposed to use magic now that I've got you. They settled down in the boat, and Harry still staring at Hagrid, trying to imagine him flying. Seems a shame to row, though, said Hagrid, giving Harry another sideways look. If it was to speed things up a bit, would you mind not mentioning it at Hogwarts? Of course not, said Harry, eager to see any more magic. Hagrid pulled out the pink umbrella again, tapped it twice on the side of the boat, and they sped off towards land. "Why would you be mad to try and rob Gringotts?" said Harry. "Spells, enchantments," said Hagrid, unfolding his newspaper as he spoke. "They say there's dragons guarding the high security vaults, and you gotta find your way. Gringotts is hundreds of miles under London, see? Deep under the underground. You'd die of hunger trying to get out of there, even if you did manage to get your hands on something." Harry sat and thought about this while Hagrid read the newspaper, the Daily Prophet. Harry had learned from Uncle Vernon that people like to be left alone when they do this, but it was very difficult. He'd never had so many questions in his life. "Ministry of Magic is messing things up as usual," muttered Hagrid, turning the page. "There's a Ministry of Magic," said Harry before he could stop himself. "Of course," said Hagrid. "They wanted Dumbledore for minister, of course, but he'd never leave Hogwarts. So old Cornelius Fudge got the job. Bungler if ever there was one. So he pelts Dumbledore with owls every morning asking for advice." What did the Ministry of Magic do? Well, their main job is to keep it from muggles that there's still witches and wizards up and down the country. Why? Why? Blimey, Harry, everyone would be wanting magic solutions to their problems. Nah, we're best left alone. At this moment, the boat suddenly bumped into the harbour wall. Hagrid folded up his newspaper and they clambered onto the stone steps out onto the street. Passers-by stared a lot at Hagrid as they walked through the little town to the station. Harry couldn't blame them. Not only was Hagrid twice as tall as anybody else, but he kept pointing at perfectly ordinary things like parking meters and saying loudly, "See that, Harry? The things these muggles dream up, eh?" "Hagrid," said Harry, panting a bit as he ran to keep up, "did you say there are dragons at Gringotts?" "Well, so they say," said Hagrid. "Crikey, I'd like a dragon." "You'd like one?" "Wanted one ever since I was a kid. Here we go." They had reached the station. There was a train to London in 5 minutes' time. Hagrid, who didn't understand muggle money, as he called it, gave the notes to Harry so he could buy their tickets. People stared more than ever on the train. Hagrid took up 2 seats and sat knitting what looked like a canary yellow circus tent. "Still got your letter, Harry," he said as he counted the stitches. Harry took the parchment envelope out of his pocket. "Good," said Hagrid. "There's a list on there of everything you need." Harry unfolded the second piece of paper that he hadn't noticed on the first night and read, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Your uniform will be 3 sets of plain work robes, black, 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear, 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar, 1 winter cloak, black with silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes should carry name tags. Books. All the students should have a copy of the following: Standard Book of Spells, A History of Magic, Magical Theory, A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration by Emmerich Switch, 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi by Felida Spore, Magic Draughts and Potions, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander, The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection by Quentin Trimble. Other equipment: 1 wand, 1 cauldron, pewter, standard size 2, a set glass or crystal files, 1 telescope and 1 brass scales. Students may also bring an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. Harry looked at Hagrid. "Can we buy all this in London?" "If you know where to go," said Hagrid. Harry had never been to London before, although Hagrid seemed to know where he was going. He was obviously not used to getting there the ordinary way. He got stuck in the ticket barrier on the underground and complained loudly that the seats were too small and the trains were too slow. "I don't know how muggles manage without magic," he said as he climbed down the broken escalator, which led into the bustling road lined with shops. Hagrid was so huge that the crowd parted easily in front of him. All Harry had to do was keep close behind him. They passed bookshops and music stores, hamburger bars and cinemas, but nowhere that looked as if you could sell a magic wand. This was just an ordinary street full of very ordinary people. Could there really be piles of withered gold buried for miles beneath them? Were there really shops that sold spell books and broomsticks? Might this all not be some huge joke that the Dursley had cooked up? If Harry hadn't known that the Dursleys had no sense of humour, he might have thought so. Yet somehow, even though everything Hagrid had told them so far was unbelievable, Harry couldn't help trusting him. "This is it," said Hagrid, coming to a halt. "The Leaky Cauldron. It's a famous place." It was a tiny, grubby-looking pub. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out, Harry wouldn't have noticed that he was even there. The people hurrying by didn't even glance at it. Their eyes slid from the big bookshop on one side to the record shop on the other, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron at all. In fact, Harry had the most peculiar feeling that only Hagrid could see it. Before he could mention it, Hagrid had led him inside. For a famous place, it was very dark and shabby. A few old women were sitting in the corner drinking tiny glasses of sherry. One of them was smoking a long, long pipe. A little man in a top hat was talking to the old barman, who was quite bald and looked like a gummy walnut. A low buzz of chatter stopped when he walked in. Everyone seemed to know Hagrid. They waved and smiled at him. The barman reached for a glass, saying, "The usual, Hagrid." "Can't, Tom. I'm on Hogwarts business," said Hagrid, clapping his great hand on Harry's shoulder, making Harry's knees buckle. "Good Lord," said the barman, peering at Harry. Can this be?" The Leaky Cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. "Bless my soul," whispered the old barman. "Harry Potter, what an honour." He hurried from behind the bar and rushed towards Harry and seized his hand with tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter. Welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realising it had gone out, and Hagrid was beaming. There was a great scraping of chairs, and next moment Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the Leaky Cauldron. "Doris Crockfield, Mr. Potter, I can't believe I'm meeting you at last. So proud, Mr. Potter. I'm just so proud. Always wanted to shake your hands. I'm all aflutter. Delighted, Mr. Potter. Just can't tell you. Diggle's the name. Dedalus Diggle." "I've seen you before," said Harry, as Dedalus Diggle's top hat fell off in his excitement. "You bowed to me once in a shop." "He remembers," cried Dedalus Diggle, looking around at everyone. "Did you hear that? He remembers me." Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crockfield kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward very nervously, one of his eyes twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry, Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." "Potter," said Professor Quirrell, grabbing Harry's hand. "Can't tell you how pleased I am to teach you." "What sort of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" Defense against the dark arts," muttered Professor Quirrell, as though he'd rather not think about it. "Not that you need that, eh, Potter?" He glanced nervously. "You'll be getting your equipment, I suppose. I've got to pick up a new book on vampires myself." He looked terrified at the very thought. But the others wouldn't let Professor keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from them all. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard over the rabble. "We must get going. Lots to buy. Come on, Harry." Doris Crockfield shook Harry's hand one last time, and Hagrid led them through the bar out into a small walled courtyard where there was nothing but a dustbin and a few weeds. Hagrid grinned at Harry. "Told you, didn't I? Told you was famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling." "Is he always that nervous?" "Oh yeah, poor bloke. Brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out books, but when he took a year off to get some first-hand experience, they say he met vampires in the Black Forest, and there was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. Scared of the students, scared of his own subject. Now where's my umbrella? Vampires? Hags? Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting bricks on the wall above the dustbin. 3 up, 2 across, right, stand back, Harry. He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered, it wriggled in the middle, and a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider, and a second later they were facing an archway large enough for even Hagrid. An archway on to a cobbled street which twisted and turned out of sight. "Welcome," said Hagrid, "to Diagon Alley." He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw the archway shrink instantly back into a solid wall. The sun shone brightly on a stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons, all sizes, copper, brass, pewter, silver, self-stirring, collapsible, said a sign hanging over them. "Yeah, you'll be needing one, but we gotta get your money first," said Hagrid. Harry wished that he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction and they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. The shops, the things outside, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside an apothecary was shaking her head as they passed. "Dragon liver, 17 sickles an ounce. You're mad." A low, soft hooting came out from a dark shop with a sign saying, "Aelop's Owl Emporium. Tawny, Screech, Barn, Brown and Snowy Owls for sale." Several boys of about Harry's age had their noses pressed up against the window with broomsticks in it. "Look," Harry heard one of them say, "it's the new Nimbus 2000, fastest ever." There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes and strange silver instruments that Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel's eyes and tottering piles of spellbooks, quills, rolls of parchments, potion bottles, globes of the moon. "Gringotts," said Hagrid. They had reached a snowy white building which towered over all the other little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold, was, "Yeah, that's a goblin," said Hagrid quietly as they walked up toward the white stone steps towards him. The goblin was about a head shorter than Harry. He had swarthy, clever face and pointed beard, and Harry noticed very long fingers and feet. He bowed as they walked inside, and they passed him without a sound. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words engraved upon them. "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay the most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there." "Like I said, you'd be mad to try and rob it," said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed to them through the silver doors as they entered into a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting on high stools behind long counters, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins on brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count, leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter. "Morning," said Hagrid to a free goblin. "We've come to take out some money for Mr. Harry Potter's safe." "Do you have the key, sir?" "Got it here somewhere," said Hagrid as he started emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of mouldy dog biscuits over the goblin's book of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on the right, weighing a pile of rubies as big as glowing coals. "Got it," said Hagrid at last, holding up a tiny golden key. The The goblin looked at it closely. That seems to be in order. And I've also got a letter here from Albus Dumbledore, said Hagrid importantly, throwing out his chest. It's about the you-know-what in Vault 713. The goblin read the letter carefully. Very well, he said, handing it back to Hagrid. I will have someone take you down to both vaults. Griphook! Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed all the dog biscuits back inside his pockets, he and Harry followed Griphook towards one of the doors leading out of the hall. What's the you-know-what in Vault 713, said Harry. Oh, can't tell you that, said Hagrid mysteriously. Very secret Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's trusted me more than my job's worth, to tell you the truth. Griphook held the door open for them. Harry, who had expected more marble, was surprised. They were in a narrow stone passageway lit with flaming torches. It sloped steeply downwards, and then there were little railway tracks on the floor. Griphook whistled, and a small cart came hurtling up the tracks towards them. They climbed in, Hagrid with some difficulty, and they were off. At first they just hurtled through a maze of twisting passages. Hagrid tried to remember left, right, left, middle fork, right, left, but it was impossible. The rattling cart seemed to know its own way because Griphook wasn't even steering. Harry's eyes stung with the cold as the air rushed past them, but he kept them wide open. Once he thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of the passage and twisted around to see if it was a dragon, but it was too late. They plunged even deeper, passing an underground lake where huge stalactites and stalagmites grew from the ceiling and floor. I never know, Harry called Hagrid over the words. What's the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite? Stalagmite's got an M in it, said Hagrid, and don't ask me questions just now. I think I'm going to be sick. He did look very green when that cart stopped last outside a small door in the passage wall. Hagrid got out and had to lean against the wall to stop his knees trembling. Griphook unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts. All yours, smiled Hagrid. All Harry's. It was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this. They'd have had it from him faster than blinking. How often had they complained how much Harry cost them to keep? And all the time there had been a small fortune belonging to him buried deep under London. Hagrid helped Harry pile some of it into a bag. The gold ones are galleons, 17 silver sickles to a galleon and 29 nuts to a sickle. It's easy enough. Right. This should be enough for a couple of terms. We'll keep the rest safe for you. He turned to Griphook. Vault 713 now, please. Can we go more slowly? There's only one speed, said Griphook. They were going deeper now and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurtled round tight corners. They went rattling over an underground ravine, and Harry leant over the side to try and see what was down at the dark bottom, but Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. Vault 713 had no keyhole. Stand back, said Griphook importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long fingers, and it simply melted away. If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped there. How often do you check to see if anyone's inside? Harry asked. About one every 10 years, said Griphook, with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside this top security vault. Harry was sure of it, and he leant forward eagerly, expecting to see fabulous jewels, or at the very least. But at first he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped up in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up, tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what was in it, but he knew better than to ask. Come on, back in this infernal cart. And don't talk to me on the way back. It's best if I keep my mouth shut, said Hagrid. One wild cart ride later, they stood blinking in the sunlight outside Gringotts. Harry didn't know where they'd run first, now that he'd a bag full of money. He didn't have to know how many galleons there were to a pound to know that he was holding more money than he'd ever seen in his whole life. More money than even Dudley had seen. Might as well get your uniform, said Hagrid, nodding towards Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. Listen, Harry, would you mind if I slipped off for a pick-me-up in the Leaky Cauldron? I hate them Gringotts carts. He still did look a bit sick, so Harry entered Madame Malkin's shop on his own, feeling very nervous. Madame Malkin was a squat, smiling witch dressed in all mauve. Hogwarts, dear, she said when Harry started to speak. Got the lot here. Another young man is being fitted up just now, in fact. In the back of the shop, a boy with a pale, pointed face was standing on a footstool, while a second witch pinned the long black robes. Madame Malkin stood Harry on the stool next to him and slipped a long robe over his head and began to pin it to the right length. Hello, said the boy. Hogwarts too? Yes, said Harry. My father's next door buying me books, and mother's up at the street looking at wands, said the boy. He had a bored, drawling voice. Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one, or I'll smuggle it in somehow. Harry was reminded strongly of Dudley. Have you got your own broom? Said the boy. No, said Harry. Play Quidditch at all? No, said Harry again, wondering what on earth Quidditch could be. I do. Father says it's a crime I'm not picked to play for my house. And I must say, I agree. Know what house you'll be in yet? No, said Harry, feeling more stupid by the minute. Well, no one really knows until they get there, do they? But I suppose I'll be in Slytherin. All our family have been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff. I mean, I think I'd leave, wouldn't you? Said Harry, wishing he could think of something a little bit more interesting to say. I say, look at that man, said the boy, suddenly nodding towards the front window. Hagrid was standing there, grinning at Harry and pointing to 2 large ice creams to show that he couldn't come in. That's Hagrid, said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. He works at Hogwarts. Oh, said the boy, I've heard of him. He's sort of a servant, isn't he? He's the gamekeeper, said Harry. He was liking this boy less and less by the second. Yes, exactly. I heard he's sort of savage, lives in a hut in the school grounds, and every now and again he gets drunk and tries to do magic, ends up setting fire to the bed. I think he's brilliant, said Harry coldly. Do you? Said the boy with a slight sneer. Why is he with you? Where are your parents? They're dead, said Harry shortly. He didn't feel much like going into the matter. Oh, sorry, said the other, not sounding sorry at all. But they were our kind, weren't they? They were a witch and wizard, if that's what you mean. I really don't think they should let the other sort in, do you? They're just not the same. They've never been brought up, in our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts till they get their letter. Imagine. I think they should keep the old wizarding families. What's your surname, anyway? But before Harry could answer, Madame Malkin said, That's you done, my dear, said Harry. And Harry, not sorry for an excuse to stop talking to the boy, hopped down from the footstool. Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose, said the drawling boy. Harry was quiet. Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose, said the drawling boy. Harry was rather quiet when he was eating his ice cream at Hagrid. What's up, said Hagrid. Nothing, Harry lied. They stopped to buy parchment and quills, and Harry cheered up a bit when they found a bottle of ink that changed colour when you wrote. When they'd left the shop, he said, Hagrid, what's Quidditch? Blimey, Harry, I keep forgetting how little you do know. Not knowing about Quidditch? Don't make me feel any worse, said Harry. He told Hagrid about the pale boy in Madame Malkin's. And he said people from Muggle families shouldn't be allowed in. You're not from a Muggle family. If he'd known who you were, he's grown up knowing your name. he's grown up knowing your name if his parents are wizarding folk. You saw them in the leaky cauldron. Anyway, what does he know about it? Some of the best I ever saw were ones who only came to magic later in life. Look at your mum, and look what she had for a sister. Okay, so what is Quidditch? Well, it's our sport. Wizard sport. It's like football in the Muggle world. Everyone follows Quidditch. Played up in the air on broomsticks. There's 4 balls. Sort of hard to explain the rules. And what are Slytherin and Hufflepuff? School houses. There's 4. Everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of duffers, but I bet I'm in Hufflepuff, said Harry gloomily. Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin, said Hagrid darkly. There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. You know who was even one. You know who? Said Harry. He was at Hogwarts? Years and years ago, said Hagrid, ending the conversation. They bought Harry's school books in a shop called Flourish and Blots. The shelves there were stacked to the ceiling with books, large as paving stones and bound in leather, books the size of postage stamps in covers of silk, books full of peculiar symbols and a few books with nothing in them at all. Even Dudley, who had never read anything, would have been wild to get his hands on some of these. Hagrid almost had to drag Harry away from curses and counter-curses, bewitch your friends and befuddle your enemies with the latest revenges, hair loss, jelly legs, tongue-tying, and much, much more, by Professor Vindictus Viridian. I was trying to find out how to curse Dudley. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but you're not allowed to use magic in the Muggle world, except in very special circumstances, said Hagrid. And anyway, you couldn't work on any of them curses yet. You'll need a lot more study before you get to that level. Hagrid wouldn't let Harry buy a solid gold cauldron either. It says pewter on your list, but they got a nice set of scales for the weighing potion ingredients and a collapsible brass telescope. Then they visited the apothecary's, which was fascinating enough to make up for this horrible smell that was everywhere. A mixture of bad eggs and rotted dried roots and bright powers, barrels of slimy stuff stood on the floor, and powders lined the walls. Bundles of feathers, strings of fangs and gnarled claws hung from the ceiling, all while Hagrid asked the man behind the counter for a supply of silver unicorn horns at 21 galleons each, and a minuscule glittering black beetle eyes, 5 nuts a scoop.